Was repotting my grandmother's roses when my phone buzzed on the porch railing. I almost didn't check it. It was a Saturday, the kind of heavy August Saturday where the air sits on your shoulders and even the bees seem lazy. My grandmother had asked me to come over and help with her garden before the heat got worse, and I was already an hour in, dirt under my fingernails, sweat at the back of my neck. My phone buzzed again. It was my brother. "We're taking Grandpa's inheritance money. Going to Scottsdale. Don't try to call." I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the porch railing, picked up my trowel, and kept working for another 2 minutes before my hands stopped cooperating. My name is Ivy, and I am the least dramatic person in my family. My younger sister Phoebe will tell you this is because I absorbed all the practicality and left her nothing but art school and emotional unavailability, which is not entirely untrue. I'm 31. I work as a paralegal at a small firm in Columbus, and for the past 4 years, I've also been my grandfather's unofficial financial manager, because nobody else in my family would do it, and because someone had to. My grandfather, everyone called him Pop, had been a civil engineer for 38 years. He was not a wealthy man by any dramatic standard, but he was careful. He owned his home outright. He had a pension. And when my grandmother passed in 2019, he consolidated everything and set up a trust, $310,000, with the intention that it would eventually be divided equally between his 4 grandchildren, me, Phoebe, my cousin Beau, and my cousin Delia. Pop had named me co-trustee, not because I was the oldest. Beau has 4 years on me, but because, as Pop put it, I was the only one who read documents before signing them. My brother is not Pop's grandchild. I should clarify that. He's my half-brother from my father's second marriage. His name is Cole. He's 28, and he has spent most of his adult life being very charming and very broke. In that order, he is not in the trust. He has never been in the trust. He has never been in the trust. He knows this. What Cole did have was access to my parents' house, their goodwill, and apparently several months of strategic relationship building with my father, who had recently become Pop's live-in caretaker after Pop's second small stroke. My father means well. I want to say that clearly, because what comes next is hard to hear if you think he's a villain. He's not. He's just a man who trusts people he loves too much and reads documents the same way he watches the news, assuming someone else has already sorted out what matters. Cole had been living with my parents since February. By April, he had convinced my father that Pop's trust was frozen in red tape and that the right thing to do, the kind thing, the family thing, was to move the accessible cash from Pop's personal savings account into a joint account that Cole had helpfully set up. For safekeeping, Cole said, in case of emergency. Pop's personal savings account had $47,000 in it. It was not part of the trust. It was Pop's spending money, his medical cushion, the account he used to pay his yard crew and his pharmacy and his grocery delivery. By the time I found out, $31,000 of it was gone. I found out because Pop called me. He called on a Tuesday evening in June while I was making dinner, and he asked me in a very careful voice whether I had made any changes to his accounts. I said no. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said I didn't think so. It took me 3 days and 4 phone calls to piece together what had happened. My father, genuinely believing he was helping, had given Cole signing authority on the joint account. Cole had moved money in increments, $3,000 here, $4,500 there, over 6 weeks. Small enough not to trigger anything, large enough to add up fast. When I called Cole, he didn't deny it. He said Pop wouldn't have minded. He said the family owed him for all the support he'd given our parents. He said I was being dramatic. I drove to my parents' house that Thursday. I sat at their kitchen table with a printed bank statement and I explained, very calmly, what Cole had done. My father went pale. My mother started crying. Cole sat across from me with his arms crossed and said I was trying to make him look bad. I said I wasn't trying to make him look like anything. The statement was doing that on its own. Cole left the room. My father apologized 17 times in the next hour. My mother made coffee. Nobody drank. And I drove home knowing that I had a decision to make about how far I was willing to take this, and knowing that Cole, whatever else he was not stupid, and that he would feel the pressure of what I now knew. What I didn't know yet was what he was already planning next. I should tell you about Phoebe because she matters more than the story initially makes room for. Phoebe is 27 and she teaches ceramics at a community arts center in Cincinnati. She makes almost no money and she is at peace with this in a way I have never fully understood. She drives a 2009 Civic with a cracked dashboard and she genuinely does not care. What she does care about, fiercely, quietly, in the way that still people tend to, is our grandfather. She'd driven up to Columbus every other weekend for the past year to spend time with Pop. She brought him audiobooks. She repotted the plants on his sun porch. She sat with him through his physical therapy appointments when I couldn't get there and our father was overwhelmed. She knew his routines better than any of us. She was the one who called me the Friday before that Saturday in August. "Something's off," she said. "Cole's been at the house 3 days in a row. Dad keeps stepping out of the room when he calls. And Pop looks scared when I got there yesterday." Just for a second. Then he covered it. I told her what I knew about the $31,000. I told her about the conversation at the kitchen table. She was quiet for a long moment. "He's going to do it again," she said. "I know. What do we do?" I told her I had already started. What I didn't tell her yet, because I wasn't sure how she'd feel about it, was exactly how far I'd gone. Here is what I had done. After the kitchen table conversation in June, I had gone to an estate attorney. Not my firm, a separate firm, someone with no connection to my family. I had explained the situation and I had asked 2 questions. What could Cole legally be charged with? And what could I do right now to protect what remained? The answer to the first question was complicated. The joint account had been set up with my father's consent, however misguided. Proving criminal intent was possible, but would take time and documentation. The answer to the second question was more immediate. As co-trustee, I had standing to restrict access to the trust accounts entirely. I had standing to move assets, to change the co-trustee designation, to add a professional fiduciary as an oversight layer. The attorney drafted the paperwork. Pop signed it on a Wednesday afternoon while Phoebe sat with him and held his hand. We also, very quietly, helped Pop move the remainder of his personal savings, the $16,000 left after Cole's withdrawals, into a new individual account that only Pop and I had access to. The old account stayed open with a small balance, enough to look normal if anyone checked. The attorney advised me to document everything and wait. She said, "People who do this once and get away with it will do it again, and when they do it again, they usually get sloppy." She was right. She was also right about the timing. I was at Pop's on that Saturday in August, the rose repotting Saturday, because Phoebe had called me the night before. Cole and my father were planning a trip. Scottsdale, Arizona, a resort called the Boulders. 5 days. Cole had told my father it was a thank you trip, that he'd cover everything, that Dad deserved a break from caregiving. What Cole had apparently not mentioned was where the money was coming from. He had tried to pull from the trust. The transfer request came through on Saturday morning. I know this because I had set up alerts on the trust account. Any transaction over $500 would notify me by text within minutes. The alert came in at 9:14 a.m. while I was on my knees in the garden. The request was for $18,000. Account it was being sent to, the same joint account Cole had used before. The request was declined automatically. The trustee designation had been updated 6 weeks earlier. Cole was not on it. My father was not on it. The system didn't even flag it as suspicious. It just didn't go through. The way a key doesn't fit a lock, it was never cut for. At 9:31 a.m., I received my brother's text. "We're taking Grandpa's inheritance money. Going to Scottsdale. Don't try to call." I read it twice, set my phone down. Tried to keep working. Failed. I called Phoebe first. She picked up on the second ring. I read her the text. There was a pause, and then she said in her very flat, very even voice, "He thinks it worked. He thinks it worked. He thinks it worked." I confirmed. She exhaled. "Okay, so what do we do right now?" I told her the transfer had already been declined. I told her about the account restructuring, the new savings account, all of it. Another silence. "You did all of that," she said. "Since June." "Yes. And you didn't tell me because I didn't want you to worry while I wasn't sure it would hold." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not mad," she said. I'm just going to need a minute. She took her minute. Then she said, "What about Dad?" That was the harder question. My father was on a plane to Scottsdale. He genuinely believed Cole had paid for the trip with money Cole had earned, or possibly borrowed from a friend, or some other story Cole had offered, and my father had chosen to believe because it was easier. My father is not a dishonest man. He is a man who has spent his entire life finding the most charitable interpretation of situations and living inside it. For most of his life, this has been a gentle and decent quality. In this particular situation, it had made him an instrument. I decided not to call my father until they landed. There was nothing to be done mid-flight, and I needed to think about how to have that conversation without him falling apart in an airport. Instead, I called the attorney. She was at home, it was a Saturday, and she still picked up. I explained what had happened. She said, "The decline transfer is logged, that's good. The text message, screenshot it immediately and email it to me." I did, right then, standing in my grandmother's driveway. "He's going to find out the transfer didn't go through," she said. "And when he does, he's going to try something else or he's going to come back angry. Either way, you're in a good position. Don't contact him first. Let him come to you." They found out at check-in. I know this because my father called me at 2017 p.m. Arizona time. His voice had the particular quality it gets when he is trying to stay calm and not succeeding. Higher than usual, slightly too careful. "Ivy," he said, "there's been some kind of problem with the reservation." Cole had booked the resort on a credit card, apparently a card he'd intended to pay off with a trust transfer. When the transfer didn't go through, the card was declined at the front desk. The resort could not hold the booking without payment. They were in the lobby of a very expensive resort in the Sonoran Desert with no room and no money, and I imagined a spreading silence between them. I let my father tell me all of this. I did not interrupt. When he finished, I said, "Dad, I need to tell you some things, and I need you to sit down somewhere and just listen." I told him about the transfer attempt. I told him about the alerts, the declined transaction, the account restructuring. I told him about the attorney, the documentation, the timeline going back to June. I told him about the $31,000. He already knew about the $31,000 that had come out at the kitchen table. But I don't think it had fully landed until that moment. Standing in a resort lobby in Arizona with a declined credit card, hearing his daughter explain that his son had tried to steal from his father-in-law a second time, using my father's own name as cover. He didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Then he said, "He told me the trust money was just sitting there unused." "It is being saved," I said. "For Pop and for his grandchildren. That's what a trust is." Another silence. "I didn't ask enough questions," he said. "No," I said. "You didn't. I didn't soften it. I wasn't cruel about it, but I didn't soften it." My father needed to hear that in plain language, and he is a man who can take plain language when he's not being protected from it. He asked me what he should do. I told him to come home, to not give Cole money for a flight if Cole asked, and to call me when he landed. He asked if Cole was going to be arrested. I told him that depended on choices that hadn't been made yet, and that I needed to talk to the attorney again before I could say anything more. He said, "Okay, just that." And we hung up. Cole called me 20 minutes later. I'd expected anger, the full throat kind, the kind that's really just fear wearing a different mask. What I got instead was something worse. He was calm, almost friendly. "There was a problem with the transfer," he said. "I think there's a glitch in the account." "There's no glitch," I said. A pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean the transfer was declined because you don't have access to that account. You haven't had access since July 3rd. Silence. Longer this time. "You changed the account," he said. Not a question. "Pop changed the account," I said, "with the help of an estate attorney. I was there." Another silence. I could hear noise in the background, lobby sounds, a distant fountain, the particular echo of a large tiled space. "Ivy." His voice shifted. Quieter, more careful. "I know this looks bad, but I've been helping out. I've been there every day with Dad. That has to count for something. You took $31,000 from a 79-year-old man's savings account," I said, "in increments, over 6 weeks. That isn't helping out. That money was going to sit there." It was going to pay for his medications, his physical therapy copays, his grocery delivery. He budgets that account, Cole. He knows exactly what's in it. Quiet. What happens now? He asked. That's going to depend on whether the $31,000 gets returned, I said, and on a conversation I'm going to have with an attorney next week. He said he needed time. I said I wasn't the one with the deadline. He hung up. My father flew home that Sunday. Cole did not come with him. I don't know how Cole got back. I didn't ask, and my father didn't offer. What I know is that my father showed up at Pop's house Sunday evening, sat down across from Pop at the kitchen table, and apologized for 40 minutes. Pop, who had known something was wrong since June and who had spent 6 weeks being very careful not to worry anyone, listened to all of it and then patted my father's hand and said, "You love people too much for your own good." That's not nothing. I was not there for that conversation. Phoebe was. She called me afterward, and I could tell she had been crying. The kind of crying that isn't sadness exactly, but more like pressure releasing. "He's not angry at Dad," she said. "I know," I said. "He's sad about Cole." "Yeah." She was quiet. Then, "Are we going to press charges?" I had talked to the attorney that morning. The honest answer was, we could. The documentation was solid. The decline transfer created a clear second incident that, combined with the first, established a pattern. But pressing charges meant involving my father as an unwitting participant, meant months of process, meant Pop, who was 79 and had already had 2 strokes, sitting through depositions. What we had asked Cole for instead, through the attorney, was a repayment agreement. Structured, notarized, with a specific timeline and a clause that any default would automatically trigger a criminal referral. No negotiation on the terms. No softening. Cole signed it 11 days later. I don't know if he fully believed the criminal referral clause. I think he knew on some level that I was the kind of person who would actually do it. The first repayment installment came in on September 4th. I want to be honest about what came after, because it's not a clean ending and I think you deserve the real version. Cole is not a part of my life now. Not in any active way. He didn't come to Thanksgiving. He sends my father occasional texts that my father answers in the brief, careful way he has developed for managing distance without cutting off entirely. My father and I talked, a long talk, the kind that doesn't fix everything but clears air. He told me he was ashamed. I told him shame wasn't what I needed from him. What I needed was for him to stop accepting stories that didn't have receipts. He's trying. He really is. He called me last month to tell me he'd said no to a request Cole had made. I don't even know what the request was. He didn't tell me. And I could hear in his voice how hard it had been and how proud he was. I told him good. I meant it. Pop is doing well. Better than expected, honestly. His last cardiology appointment came back stable. He got a new yard crew because the old one kept canceling, and he is very pleased with them. He asks about Phoebe every time I call, which is twice a week, which I know sounds like a lot, but has become one of the fixed points of my schedule in a way I didn't plan and wouldn't give up. Phoebe is still in Cincinnati. She fired the kiln twice last month and sent me photos of a set of mugs she made that are genuinely the most beautiful mugs I have ever seen. I asked if I could buy a set, and she said I absolutely could not, that they were mine, and she'd bring them at Christmas. The trust is intact. All $310,000, plus the interest it has continued to accumulate. When the time comes, and we don't talk about that time more than we have to, it will go where Pop always intended it to go, equally, between the 4 of us, the way it was always supposed to be. I think about that Saturday in August more than you'd expect. Not the text, the moment after the text, when I put my phone face down and tried to keep working and couldn't. 2 minutes of trying to stay calm while knowing someone I grew up around had just announced casually in a text message that he had tried to steal from our grandfather. What I felt wasn't rage. I want to be clear about that because I think people expect the rage. What I felt was something smaller and colder, a kind of grief, for the person Cole might have been if he had chosen differently, for my father who was on a plane believing a story, For the version of my family that existed in the early 2000s at summer barbecues before everything complicated, I let myself feel that for approximately those 2 minutes. Then I picked up my phone and I started making calls. I am 31 years old. I am a paralegal. I am the person in my family who reads documents before signing them, who sets up alerts on accounts, who asks the attorney to pick up the phone on a Saturday and is not surprised when she does. I did not choose that role. It was assigned to me, the way the practical one is always assigned. But I have learned, slowly, in the way real things are learned, through bad nights and hard conversations and 40 minutes of my father apologizing to an old man at a kitchen table, that being the practical one is not the opposite of love. It is one of its forms. Sometimes taking care of the people you love means moving their money before someone else does. Sometimes it means letting a declined credit card do the talking. And sometimes it means being the person who doesn't flinch when you have to say, plainly, to someone you grew up with, what you did was wrong, and there are going to be consequences, and I am not going to look away to make this easier for you. I'm still the person who shows up to repot the roses. I just also know how to change the locks. I've thought a lot about what it actually means when someone chooses to take advantage of a person who trusts them. Not the legal side of it, not the paperwork. I know the paperwork. I mean the choice itself. The moment a person looks at someone who loves them and decides that what that person has is more important than what that person is. Cole made that choice. He made it more than once. And I don't think he woke up one morning and decided to become someone who steals from a 79-year-old man. I think it happened in smaller steps. Each one a little easier than the last, each one justified by something. He needed it more. The money was just sitting there. Nobody was paying attention. That's how it usually works. Not a leap, a slow walk in a bad direction. What I've come to understand is that the consequences he faced weren't punishment from the outside. They were the natural result of what he built. He constructed a situation where he assumed no one was watching, no one was prepared, and no one would follow through. And every single one of those assumptions was wrong. The declined card at that resort in Scottsdale wasn't bad luck. It was the direct and logical end of a chain he started himself, link by link, going back to February. That's what I mean when I say actions have weight, not in any abstract or mystical sense. Just plainly, what you do accumulates. It compounds. The person who moves money quietly and carefully for 6 weeks to protect an old man also accumulates. The person who sets up alerts, who calls an attorney on the Saturday, who documents everything, that accumulates too. And when the moment arrives, one pile is heavier than the other. I think about Phoebe a lot in relation to this. She didn't do the legal work. She didn't restructure the accounts. What she did was show up weekend after weekend and sit with Pop through his physical therapy and bring him audiobooks and notice when his eyes look scared. That accumulates too. That is its own kind of preparation. When I needed someone to be with Pop while he signed documents, she was already there. She had already been there for months because that's who she chose to be. The hardest part of this whole thing wasn't Cole. It was my father. Because my father is a good man who made himself useful to a bad plan by refusing to ask hard questions. And that's a different kind of cautionary story, not about greed, but about the cost of choosing comfort over clarity. He wanted to believe Cole had good intentions. That desire to believe cost Pop $31,000 and cost my father a lot of sleep. I don't think wisdom is something you're born with. I think it's what you're left with after you've been tested and you chose to stay honest instead of convenient. My father is learning that, slowly. I'm still learning it myself. What I know is this. The people who protected Pop, me, Phoebe, the attorney who picked up on a Saturday, we didn't do it because we expected anything back. We did it because it was right and because he was worth it and because some things matter enough to be inconvenient for. That's not a lesson I read somewhere. That's just what it looks like when you live it.